Hi everyone. In this video, I want to talk about the required risk assessment procedures. So we've talked about an overview of what this idea of risk assessment is and how we have to think about the client that we're working on and understanding the risks that they have so that we can plan our audit accordingly. But how do we do that? How do we go and assess risk? That just seems like a really broad and undefined and nebulous area. So how do we actually do that? Is what I want to kind of overview in this video. So the auditing standards give us 5 required tasks that we have to do. So the first one is that we have to gain an understanding of the client's business and its environment. So if we don't understand the client, how could we possibly come in and audit them and tell them they're doing a good job? So the very first thing we ever have to do is gain that understanding and understand the client so that we can come in and audit it. Because again, if you don't understand it, you can't audit it. The next thing is to perform preliminary analytical procedures. And I'll talk about this in another video, but essentially analytical procedures are ways that we look at the data and look at trends and try to identify specific areas that might need an additional audit effort. So that's another required piece of this puzzle. Then we have to have an audit team brainstorming discussion. So the audit team are all those individuals who will be participating in the audit. And at the very beginning, you're going to sit down together in a boardroom and you are going to talk about areas that might have increased levels of risk, areas that have been problematic in the past. It really is just there to set that tone for the engagement and get everybody on the same page and thinking about ways that fraud could happen, how it could be concealed, ways that we might be able to detect fraud within that organization, areas that might be specifically risky, and just to communicate that information with the whole team. So again, this is usually kicked off at the start of the audit, but these discussions should be ongoing throughout the entire engagement. Then additionally, we could have conversations, or we are required to have conversations with the audit committee, management, and others within the company. So we're going to sit down and have these discussions and ask them, what are areas that are particularly risky? How do you address risk that comes in within your organization? So we sit down with management and the audit committee and have these discussions. And then finally, we have to document everything that we do within our audit. So if it's not documented, it's not done. So if we have this inquiry or we have this brainstorming discussion, but we don't have any documentation that it happened, then how does someone else know that we actually did that? So we have to make sure that everything that we do has proper documentation. The last thing I want to cover in this video is fraud and other significant risks. So there are other things that we have to do that standards tell us we need to consider. So first, we always want to presume that improper revenue recognition is a fraud risk. So we always are going to want to look at revenue recognition and make sure that revenue is recorded in the correct period, at the correct time, in the correct amounts, because that is a high fraud risk area. Also, management override could lead to fraud as well, or as an indicator of fraud. So we're going to want to be on the lookout for any indicators that management has overridden particular controls. And then finally, we want to identify significant risks that are going to require special audit consideration. So are there any areas within this particular company that has higher levels of risk? That's the last thing that we're going to want to do. So I'm going to have a couple more videos for you in this chapter, specifically on how we can gain that understanding in our client, and then also on preliminary analytical procedures. So stay tuned for those.